A toddler is constantly trying new things. What we do is we learn how to stop being brave. We learn the world's not safe. We learn I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I don't belong. All these limiting beliefs get stacked up and we stop being brave.
When you knock off your top fear, everything under it is insignificant.
It can feel like a depression, but really it's a transformation.
If you've ever felt weighed down by fear, uncertainty, or the constant chatter of the inner critic, this episode is a reminder that transformation is possible.
When I wrote my first book, Brave, my manuscript got rejected. Most of us think brave, but we don't act brave. And in my second book, I talk about the power of the little brave act. And if the action still feels too big, you got to chunk it down smaller and smaller again.
In this week's episode, I'm joined by Sheila V, an inspiring voice of transformation, spirituality, and authentic living. Sheila opens up about her own journey through the dark night of the soul, the noise of self-doubt, and the brave steps that led her towards healing, authenticity, and self-worth.
Everything that I hung on to dissolved very quickly, and it was the perfect conditions to rebuild from nothing.
Taking us on a journey through the noise, helping us turn breakdowns into powerful breakthroughs is my guest this week, Sheila V. Sheila, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I thank you for your time. I'm grateful for your presence, and I can't wait to unlock some of the power that is Sheila V.
That's very kind of you. I can't wait to unlock some of the power that is Sheila V too.
There's plenty ahead, but I know you've unlocked a lot. Sheila, when I ask you, what does the noise of life mean to you? What speaks to you today?
I guess the noise of life is the experience that we have that stops us from being connected to ourselves. So the noise of life is the things that distract us from ourselves. They distract us from stillness. They distract us from intuition. And the noise of life can really reroute us and derail us away from our purpose, away from presence, away from the things that will give us meaning and where we will find our calling and our purpose.
Yeah, perfect. And if you look back through your life, Sheila, when you look at external and internal noises, what reflections have you got?
So I grew up, I'm Sri Lankan, born in Australia, and I grew up with a conservative culture and a conservative family. And I think the noises of life were very much around what does success mean? And there was, I guess, a kind of a narrow paradigm of what success means, which is job titles, income levels, having degrees. There are a lot of, external factors around success. Not saying that there's anything wrong with them, but I felt like that's all there was as a measurement and a benchmark. And as I got older, I felt like I was starting to access more of my intuition, more of my intuitive abilities, more of my creative centers. And I think as a woman or a man, when we have our awakening or that defining moment in life where we realize that we've abandoned ourselves, I had that moment, and then it began this big journey of healing. And so up until that point, the noise of life had distracted me from healing, and it had distracted me from authentic living. And I'd bought into constructs around success and materialism and social constructs that just meant I abandoned myself. I started to live a life that was inauthentic.
So you said you had abandoned yourself.
Yeah.
So who did you work out you were?
I worked out I was very multifaceted. Up until that point, I'm Sheila. I'm a chartered accountant with an MBA. I'm a finance director. This is just who I was. There was a lot of I's in someone said, "Who are you?" This is who I was. A lot of titles. And then after the awakening, I realized I was way more multifaceted. I was way more curious and creative than I ever allowed myself to be. And who I am, I realize, is now unraveling and unrolling with each day and week. I have more opportunities to speak and write. When I collaborate with people, I think, I wonder where this is going to take me. The older version of myself would have been very goal and outcome focused. And the newer version of me that I discovered is more like, I wonder where we're going with this. I wonder why I met you. I see the divine hand in my day. I see the universe in my day. Some people call it signs and synchronicity, signs from the universe. Some people might call it, connections with ancestors or spirit guides. Some people just might find it some sort of like a divine order, but I see that. I see kind of the miracles in my life, which has been, I think when you can see it, it's a real gift.
Listening to you explain that and share that, curiosity was a big word that come up for me right there. And you sound like in life, you're forever curious.
After I had one of my early awakenings, I became very curious about spirituality and religion and around personal development and consciousness. And up until that point, I felt like I'd mastered one career, which was accounting. It was very dry, very right and wrong. And then this door opened, and I've always been a very curious person by nature, but I just did not funnel it into my life. I kind of shut it down. But the curiosity meant that I started to read every book I could get my hands on. This is well before podcasts were a thing or Facebook was even a thing. In my 20s, I read personal development books, and I started to have this really insatiable appetite for knowledge around consciousness and around mindfulness and meditation and spirituality. And so curiosity meant I read wide, and I sat with many different teachers. I asked a lot of really interesting questions. And then I guess I went on a path to become a teacher myself, because to be a teacher, you need to be curious. You need to learn. And to be a student, you need to that as well. So I guess that's how I ended up having some mastery. And I don't feel like I've ever got mastery, truthfully. I always sit at the feet of other teachers learning. However, I think there's always someone behind us we can teach and bring along with us. And so, and I feel like I allow my son to teach me. I allow my husband to teach me. I see everyone as a teacher to me. But the old version of me was very much trying to be an authority and trying to be important and trying to be the best. And now I let the world teach me what I need to know in my lessons every day.
When you look back at your journey, was it a slow shift back to alignment, or was there something that, kind of clicked and, had that awakening straight away?
Look, it's a bit of both. And, I've coached many students through this process of their awakening, and I've never really seen anyone not have it without a dark night. The dark night is one of those experiences. Eckhart Tolle describes it, and I wrote about this in my first book, Brave. He said, you don't awake unless you're in a nightmare. He goes, we don't awake from the dream unless it is a bad, disturbing dream. So the awakening has to be via a darkness, a dark night, a challenging situation. So I definitely had my dark night, which was a job loss. It was health issues. It was my apartment flooded. It was a relationship breakup, all within 6 weeks. And so I was my ego was flattened. Everything that I hung on to in my life dissolved very quickly. And it was the perfect conditions to rebuild from nothing. Right. So whilst there was this moment of a dark night, I also look back and there was slow and gentle moments where I just met the right person that gave me the right book, or the right teacher turned up, or I found myself holding a flyer and going to a workshop. So I feel like there was a preparedness, a preparation for an awakening into a new life. But what most of us do, and what I did, was I resisted it. I clung on to my old life because so much of my identity was wrapped up in it. I did not know who I was without all of that. And there's a space, it's called the liminal space, where story A has not dissolved and we haven't created story B. So the old identity is dissolved, and then the new one is yet to be constructed. And that liminal space, which is a space where we tend to cocoon and heal, it can be really disruptive. It can be really frightening. It can feel chaotic. So when you're going through a divorce or being made redundant, those weeks and months after, you're like, who am I? It can feel like a depression, but really it's a transformation. And so for me, I've had multiple dark nights, but it's also there's been a slowness and a gentleness at times.
So I know a lot of people that go through these dark nights and events. I've seen it through people I've worked with. I've experienced it myself, is sometimes that when that dark night happens, when those events happen, you can let it define you, whether it's a job loss, whether it's a relationship breakdown, whether it's a health issue. You can let it define you, or you can actually look into it deeper and actually let it launch you forward. If there's people sitting there, which I know there would be, listeners listening going, I'm going through a tough time. I'm going through a dark night of the soul. I have broken up. I've lost my job, whatever it is. Talk to me about when it happened to you. What were some of the internal questions that you asked yourself, and what were some of the answers that came from that?
Yeah, so that's a really nice question, because I think a lot of people are going through a transformation and they're thinking, I don't know how to get through this. A friend said to me many years ago, don't waste a crisis. So when you're in the middle of a crisis, one of the first things to think is, how can I not waste this? Because we don't want to go through too many in our life, right? We can't choose how many we go through, but we don't want them too frequently. We want to really milk the outcome of the crisis. So in my first book, Brave, at the end of the first chapter, I ask questions, and I call them dangerous questions, because when we answer them honestly, they actually redirect our life towards a life of more alignment, where our purpose sits, where our relationships feel so much more healthier. There's this new version of ourselves sitting on the other side of these questions. And I think the quality of the questions we ask ourselves dictates the quality of our life. So I asked myself again, say, for example, after I had job loss or relationship breakdown, it's, firstly, how did I contribute to this? Like, what can I take responsibility for? Moves us out of victim mode, that question. If I change nothing today, am I okay with where I would be in 5 years' time? And you realize that I did need to change the job. I did need to leave that relationship. I did need to move cities. I did need to start a new career. I did need to start the degree. So there's this looking ahead, visioning, even just 2 years, 5 years, and thinking, where do I want to be? Because every decision we make now is leading us there, and the decisions we were making were not going to get us there. That again can move us into a level of peace and surrender. Another good question is, who am I now that isn't serving me? Like, how am I behaving now that is not the happiest version of myself? What am I doing? What are my thoughts? It allows you to look at internally at what is your internal processing. I will say, Steve, I think when you're going through a dark night, it's so important to work with a coach or a mentor, because we're trying to step into a new version of ourselves, and quite often we need someone who's walked that path to hold our hand. So I've been so blessed. I've had some wonderful coaches and mentors. And the way you choose a coach and mentor is look at their life, look at how happy they are, look at how they turn up on social media, knowing it's not always real, sure, but look at the choices they're making and think, I want to be that person. I don't know if I want to be all of them, but there's some big qualities, or the way they're running their business, or the way they're in their marriage, or the way they're parenting. And that's kind of how I chose it. I looked ahead and went, you are a template of who I want to become. And I think seeking that in the dark night, that coach and mentor can help you ask great questions and help you find the answers.
And, was there a couple of answers that you kind of came back to you and you just went, wow?
So one of my early dark nights was when I realized I had like intuitive gifts, like highly pronounced intuitive gifts. I'm now a corporate trainer and a keynote speaker, but there was about 8 to 10 years that I was a proper psychic medium on psychic TV channeling. And I still love that kind of stuff. That's still part of my persona, my personality and my abilities. But I went really into that. And you can imagine how hard it was leaving chartered accounting as an executive and deciding I'm going to give this a career a go. And so it was a really scary moment when I realized I actually really love spirituality and I want to dedicate a few years to studying it. And I knew that most people in my life wouldn't understand it. I knew that my family would think I've just gone bonkers. Yet looking back now, it was the bridge to the work I'm doing, because all that spirituality I learned, and then I studied trauma, mindfulness, high performance, executive coaching. Like every door led to the next door. But I had to walk through that first door that made absolutely no sense. And for your listeners, it might be Reiki healing or energy healing or breath work or, dance therapy or something a bit alternative to your day-to-day corporate executive senior leadership role. Whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. But for me, it felt so far from where I started that I thought this is really scary, because I was still very externally motivated. And I thought, I don't know how to explain this to anyone. 10 years on, I have no interest in explaining anything to anyone. I just do me on my own terms. But back then I was constantly thinking, how do I tell people? How do I explain it? And there's okay to feel that way. At some point, I realized it did not matter what anyone thought. All it mattered was how I felt about me first thing in the morning. Was I happy? Was I waking up and doing things that lit me up and gave me so much joy, peace, excitement, happiness, contentment? And when I got to that place, so much momentum kicked in because I was like a horse out of the gates. All new teachers, books, workshops kicked in, students showed up to ask me to mentor them, more opportunities opened, I got a book deal. Like, so many things happened. But I think there's this big leap of faith that we need to take into the unknown. And that's when our ego gets really tested.
And all those things you wouldn't have experienced if you didn't have the courage to let go.
Oh, 100%. I've written 2 books now. I speak globally. I've been given so many opportunities, as a coach and as a leader. And then, I was on this TV show, Big Miracles, where I shared my IVF journey. And I don't think the universe would have given me that opportunity if I had not been brave enough all those years prior to quit my job. Then the universe, tapped me on the shoulder, the old tap, and said, "You're brave. And because you've been brave in all these ways, we think you're brave enough to do this crazy thing called showing and sharing with the world your IVF journey." Because many people have reached out to me on Instagram and said, "How did you get on the show and how did you do it?" And I was tapped on the shoulder. I didn't put myself forward. So I think, and even with my second book, my publisher rang me and said, "We want a second book from you." And I was like, "I'm not writing again. That was hard." But then my husband sat me down and goes, "I think you've got another book in you." And I said, "Yeah, I think I do." But the taps happen because everyone wants to be tapped. But to be tapped on the shoulder, we need to have taken the first leap, the first brave leap towards our destiny, towards our calling, towards what we're meant to do.
And it doesn't matter what it is in life. Everyone's always, reaching out, looking for the magic pill. How did that happen? Like, what was the easy path of that, right? And the interesting thing is to be brave, to, have the courage to open that door, to step through the door and into the unknown, as you say.
Yeah.
Is scary, right?
Yeah, well, your life's demonstrated that, Steve. You've pivoted so much. I mean, this podcast is amazing. And, you're an example and such a leader for men's mental health and speaking out. And it would have taken courage and bravery just to start this podcast, just to start coaching it like the way you do.
Yeah, because there's that the inner critic, the self-doubt, the brain tells you, "Oh no, there's too many podcasts. What's the point of doing the podcast? Oh, you're not going to be good at it." I go back and listen to the first, episodes of Share Podcast when I launched that a couple of years ago, and I go, "Oh," but I can see my growth. And I think a lot of the time we don't actually honor ourselves and acknowledge the growth that we've had, not just in the last year, but in the last 10 years, the last 20 years. If you go back and sit at yourself as a 10-year-old, as a 15-year-old, as a 20-year-old, in some of those moments and experiences that have crafted and curated and molded us, you really understand how far you've come. And all the experiences that you've gone through, the doors you've stepped through, the challenges that you've faced have actually built a strength in you that can power you forward.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's several ways to go back and look at your own growth. The first is scroll through your Instagram on Facebook and look back 10 years. And you might have been, I was holding probably a bottle of wine and drinking and disassociating and suffering from, look into those photos in the eyes of that little younger woman, and I can see anxiety and depression behind your eyes. So fast forward now, my life on my phone is a very different life. I think more evidence of how I've transformed my life is the relationships and how everyone shows up for me and how I show up for them. I have a wonderful marriage. I have a child. I have beautiful friendships in my life. I have women and men around me who celebrate me, who get excited for my opportunities, who I celebrate them. So I have such beautiful friendships. And I think that's the evidence of the work I've done, because everything outside of ourselves is a mirror of our internal workings. So when people around me celebrate me, it shows me my own worth. When I have a beautiful marriage, it shows me how much love I think I deserve. So many years ago, I didn't feel worthy of love, so I attracted relationships that were not loving. They were quite toxic and unhealthy. So I think relationships that we have around ourselves is another evidence of how much growth we have. And then our ability to sit in discomfort. Many years ago, I couldn't handle discomfort. I couldn't handle, sitting outside my comfort zone too much. Now I pretty much live outside my comfort zone. I just dance back in every so often. So that's another evidence, is my ability to be with discomfort, because to be with discomfort, we need a very regulated nervous system. I've spent a lot of years working on trauma and regulating my nervous system with many healing modalities. So that's another piece of evidence. Yeah, look how far I've come. I'm not triggered as much. I'm actually quite calm in this challenging situation I find myself in.
So someone sitting there that's, facing the mirror, looking at themselves, or standing at the door about to grab the handle, but it feels a little bit too tough. What I'd love to do is get you to share a moment where you were gripped with fear, where you needed the courage and you needed to step forward through that door. How did you achieve that?
I remember I came back from Peru, and I just done ayahuasca actually in Peru. And I got on the plane back from LA, and I did ayahuasca in Peru, but I flew to LA just to have an integration at Esalen. And I remember sitting there thinking at the LAX airport, I need to resign. I need to go down 3-4 days a week. Like, it's time to move away from this job and this career towards this new career, which I'm doing now, coaching, mentoring, speaking, all this personal development stuff, because I loved it so much. And I was gripped with fear because I thought, I don't know how to make money. I don't know how to go without my salary. I don't know how to run a business. Like, there was so much fear. But I remember thinking, if I don't make a change now in 1 year, because it was like the 3rd of January, and I remember thinking, in 1 year, it's going to be the exact same. So I think that January period is always a nice time, but why wait till January? I could have made this decision many months before. So I remember just thinking, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So we've got to move from I'm going to do it, the thought, into the action. So I remember I walked into my office the next day, 5th of January or something, and I opened my computer, and instead of reading emails, I opened a Word document and I started typing my resignation letter. Like, that is the first thing I have to do, because I knew if I read emails, I would get caught back in the vortex of work and my old life. So I made a commitment on that plane. I'm going to get into work and I'm going to write my resignation letter. And it wasn't a resignation. It was a letter to request to go 4 days a week. And I walked into my boss's office and I said, we need to have a chat. So most of us think brave, but we don't act brave. So the acting of the brave has to be a little brave act. And in my second book, I talk about the power of the little brave act. And if the action still feels too big, you got to chunk it down smaller and smaller again till you can actually move into action. So the problem with bravery, we think of it too big. We need to start thinking about it in a smaller and smaller way. So I didn't know what was going to happen with my boss after then, but the act of just giving him the letter, it was imperfectly written. My voice was shaking. I felt my shaking in my body because I wasn't sure if he was going to be angry or what was going to happen. But I knew my life was about to go in a whole new direction.
And there'd be people sitting there going, oh, but I'm not brave. I can't be courageous. But bravery isn't innate, right? It can be cultivated like a muscle.
Bravery is absolutely a habit we cultivate. This is the truth about bravery. We're all brave as children. You look at anyone learning to walk as a toddler. I look at my son. He's brave. He falls down and gets up, falls down and gets up. A toddler does not think I can't do it. A toddler is constantly trying new things. What we do is we learn how to stop being brave through conditioning from mostly parents or authorities around us. We learn the world's not safe. We learn I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I don't belong. All these limiting beliefs get stacked up and we stop being brave. It's an innate part of all of our natures, but it's actual muscle that we have to build as adults because of the trauma or the experiences we have as children. And the beautiful thing I've learned about being brave in my life is it is a muscle that only builds. Once you become braver, it's easier to take that next step and that next step. So that first little, I coach a lot of women around speaking, and some of them are really nervous just to do a little panel in their company. But once they speak on that panel, they're thinking, I can do more. What else can I do? And they've got this dream of doing a TEDx talk or maybe speaking on a podcast or launching their own. Once you do that little one talk in a meeting with your manager, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and a momentum kicks in. So you've got to find that little thing you want to do, knowing that behind that is the next little thing waiting for you.
And I think the message that you've got to share, if you're a speaker, if you're a coach, if you're delivering any kind of message out there, is that, a lot of people go, oh, what am I going to talk about? Well, we have the messages inside us. We know what lifts us up, what grows us, what really calls us. And I think it's really about dialing into that authenticity. So in the past, when I've spoken many years ago and I was like, oh, I've got to have this full script and I've got to really, be over prepared. And then the issues would come with that because I'd be like, hang on. So now a lot of the time I'll get up and just talk or I'll just speak, because you get better the more you speak, and speak from the heart, speak from what is inside you, rather than speaking on something that you don't know anything about. If you're speaking on a topic, if you're speaking on something that's part of your purpose, part of your passion, something that is really inside you, the message just comes out.
The message comes out through your story. So we've all got a stack of stories. You've got a load of interesting stories, Steve, so do I. And it's about going, okay, what's the story, but what's also the challenge within the story that I had to tackle? And then what's the wisdom from the story that I have now upon reflection? As far as speaking, the more I speak, the more I realize what lands with the audience. Like, I can see the nodding heads. I can hear the laughs. When I say something that doesn't land and I think, oh, I haven't got a reaction, I'll just take it out. So the challenges with speaking is the only way you get better at speaking is speaking. And so, yeah, you need to do that first panel, that first step onto a stage. And it's not always about speaking on a stage. For some of us and for many of us, it's just speaking up in a meeting at work, or it's just about doing a little post on social media about something that's very important to you. But I think there is a journey we all have to go on to realize we're worthy enough, and our story or our little piece of wisdom is worthy enough. And there are people within our inner circle and even outer circle that are looking at us possibly for that kind of wisdom and inspiration. And I think we have to sit in that uncomfortable place of imposter syndrome for a little while we're building up our resilience, our muscle around confidence. And that's the place we don't want to sit. We want to be comfortable, right? That's why I said learning to be in discomfort is the greatest skill we can have as humans.
And I think it's interesting, you shared something recently, which kind of gets reflection on us talking about speaking and being out there in the public, view, is that, not everyone in a crowd that you're speaking to, not everyone online is going to love or like what you do, right? It's just what it is. But for me, I always focus on, if I write a post or if I share something or if I deliver a speech, I know it's just that one person I'm talking to, right? That one person that it's going to land with. Now, a lot of the time it's more than one person, but I just focus on the one person that needs to hear it today, not the whole crowd or not the, 9,000 followers or whatever it is. I just focus on, there's this message I'm sharing is being shared because it needs to land with someone today. And that really helps me focus on, kind of getting rid of the inner and outer critics and stopping me from moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. Focus on that one person that needs to hear it. And if that feels still a little too scary because it feels like there's a set of eyes on you, focus on that younger version of you that was 30 or 20 that needed to hear it, and think, what could I write for them? And I think that even takes it out of someone external and makes it a little bit even more personal. When I wrote my first book, Brave, my manuscript got rejected. I'd written 40,000 words, and my publisher handed it back to me over lunch, and she said, look, your writing isn't vulnerable enough. We can't publish it as it is. And my heart just sank. But I also knew she was being truthful about it. I agreed with her. I was trying to write this polished version, and I wasn't really going into the depth of the pain I'd been through. So I went back and I wrote it for me. I thought, okay, I'm going to give this another go. And I rewrote 70,000 words, the whole book. And I wrote it for the version of me at 20, 25, 30, 32, all those sad, depressed, anxious versions. she needed a guide at that time and she didn't have one. So what would I say to her? And when I wrote that book, it was, I handed it to my publisher and she's like, now we have a book. Now we have a book. So sometimes just writing it for that younger version of ourselves can be quite helpful.
Something I worked out is for many years I sat there and went, what's my greatest fear? And at one point it was probably death. I was like, I was really scared of death. But my stepdad passed away. It was a beautiful last week of his life. He got to choose his own ending. And it was just absolutely beautiful. And it really reframed and redefined what death was for me. And it no longer, I suppose, held the fear of it. But I sat there, for years going, my biggest fear then was jumping out of a plane and skydiving. And I'd keep saying it, I'm going to skydive, I'm going to skydive. And for many years, I was above the weight that you could actually skydive. So it was kind of a bit of a protection, like, I can't jump out of a plane because I'm holding a little bit extra weight. And then when I lost the weight, it was like, oh, hang on, I can do this now. But, I'll do it one day. I'll do it one day when I feel ready. And for my 40th birthday, my family bought me a skydive experience and a voucher. And I thought, cool, I'll lock that in sometimes when I'm ready. And it was just before the end of 2024 last year. And I went, I'm not going into 2025 not having achieved, jumping out of a plane. So I jumped on. 3 days later, I jumped out of the plane, and my approach to it was very much, I walked in and I was like, good morning, how are you? And the lady on the desk was like, who is this person, right? But it was confidence. It was, there's a movie that I love, which I watched with the kids when the kids were younger, and it was Matt Damon, We Bought a Zoo, right? And in that, the big message out of that movie is 20 seconds of courage, right? 20, like if you have the courage and you get started, it carries you on. But anyway, I jumped out of a plane, and it was a big shift for me, and it's created a lot of opportunities for me this year, because when you knock off your top fear, then everything under it is insignificant, right? Like if you come up against something, you're like, I jumped out of a freaking plane, like doing this, or, going on a podcast, or, standing up and sharing something in front of a crowd. That is nothing. I jumped out of a plane. I'd love to know, Sheila, what's one of your biggest fears that you haven't yet achieved?
Gosh, one of the biggest fears I haven't yet. I feel like I've done so many things that I've wanted to do. I want to live overseas. I'd love to live in North America. I'd love to just pack up, uproot, and have an overseas experience with my husband and my son. So I don't know if that's my biggest fear, but that's something that I think, like what would that look like? I don't know if there's fears anymore. I've got fears of losing my parents. I think that's I don't fear dying myself, but I fear the loss of people around me. That's a fear. And then when I find that fear come up, I just think I've been through many hard things before, and I can, I'll get through this when it happens eventually, which happens when we lose our parents. But I don't know. I think that's it. I think, I'm more curious. Again, I try and have more of a curious mind. I don't know if there's anything I'm really fearful of, but you might have to leave that one with me, Steve.
Yeah, we might come back to that. But so talking about, uprooting and shifting to North America, what stops you?
I think right now I'm still, and I'm an impatient person by nature. I'm a Sagittarius. I've got like 4 planets in Sagittarius in my astrology. So I'm just very, everything needed to happen yesterday. And in some ways, I think that's what contributed to my success, but also my downfalls at times. And I think sometimes we have to hold our vision and just know the vision will present when we're energetically ready. I want to have another child. I also am wanting to work on new material. And so I know it will feel right to start working in multiple locations. And I'd love to work in Asia as well. So I've always, when I quit my job many years ago, I thought global. I thought I want to be a coach and a mentor and a speaker and an author globally. But you have to start local first. So I think I'm just being patient for a few more seeds to be planted and watered and see what sprouts.
Yeah, brilliant. I can't wait to witness that as well. Talk to me about the noise that goes on, obviously when people, reach these, as we said, the dark nights of the soul, there's a lot of noise at different points in life. Tell me about how you calm the noise. So if you're in a point, and we all have these days, it doesn't matter if you're Tony Robbins or Mel Robbins or whoever you are in the world, everyone has a bad day. Everyone has a day that they struggle with. Talk to me about some of the practices that you put in place to actually help calm the noise and, kind of embrace that discomfort.
So, a really powerful practice is connecting with our inner child. Connecting, it's either an inner child, a younger version of ourselves, or connecting with anxiety or depression. So, what we tend to do is when anxiety or depression come up, we want to run from it. We're seeking dopamine. So we watch Netflix, we eat chocolate, we go and buy something online. We're searching for a hit, and because we're dopamine deprived. And what we do is we reject anxiety and depression and we make it wrong. But imagine if you embraced anxiety and depression, knowing it's feedback. So anxiety and depression are trying to say, hey, the way you're living is not working. That relationship you're trying to hang on to is no longer serving you. That job that you turn up for, that it's not right, that's not right for you either. It's all feedback. So the technique is you connect with either a younger version of yourself and you just ask for an age to come forward. You'll just get a number, 17, 8, 10. So that part of you is saying, hey, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling unseen. And you can start a journal process with that, a dialogue, just a somatic connection, start chatting to that younger version of yourself. Or you can actually connect to the emotion itself. So just speak to anxiety. Anxiety, what are you trying to tell me? Sheila, I'm trying to tell you to slow down. Okay. Anxiety, what would slowing down look like? It look like just going out for a walk right now. So when we're in that really activated system, it may not be quite easy to, but that's one powerful technique. If you're feeling like you can't even do that, just getting out and moving your body, getting out of the house and moving your body. So emotions mean energy in motion. So when we're experiencing an emotion, we need to try and move it. So we move it through fast-paced, movement, through cold water therapy, like just diving into the ocean. I was rewriting my keynote a few weeks ago and I was so stuck. And I said to my husband, it wasn't a warm morning either. It was a proper winter morning in Sydney. And I said to my husband, we've just got to go and I've got to dive into the ocean this morning. And he's like, really? Because he's usually the one that leads me. I said, no, let's go. I need to dive in. So we drove to Freshwater Beach and I just dove in and it was cold. But I remember just feeling this aliveness when I jumped out of the ocean. And I was like, okay, I'm clear now. Something as small as that. Yes, it's uncomfortable. And then you've got, movement practices, inner child work. And I love breath work because breath work is the fastest way to become present to your body and the inhale and the exhale. So I don't do breath work alone. I'll do a guided breath work meditation because I got a very monkey mind. So, work on Insight Timer or Calm app or a good breathwork facilitator online. You'll be able to find a track. And then I save it. So I'm not online Googling things. I've got my track ready to go. I press play and I just listen to the breathwork.
Tell me, how often do you check in on yourself and where you are at your journey? Because obviously I think a lot of the time people kind of set out towards goal and achievement. They have that courage, they're brave, they kind of launch forward. And they have all these goals in place. I want to have this kind of car. I want to have this kind of job. I want to have this kind of house. And then sometimes they get there and they haven't actually rechecked in on their goals. And 10 years down the track, they're sitting in a house, having the car that they've got, having the job that they've got, and they're unhappy, right? Mm-hmm. So because as they've shifted, their goals have shifted, but they haven't actually checked in and reset their goals. Talk to me about how how often you check in and reset your goals.
I've reset them very frequently. So it's like a practice and a conversation in my house and in my marriage. So my husband and I often talk about where are we going? Like, what's the big vision? What kind of life do we want? And it's not always about the house. It's like, what's a beautiful weekend look like with kids? What does our marriage look like in a romantic way? What are your adventures look like? My husband likes running ultra marathons and going off into the wilderness for days. I love doing retreats. So we talk about our dreams, and I think if you keep on speaking it often enough, it speaks it into existence. I have a visioning board. I don't do vision boards in January. I do them every month. Every few weeks, I check in and go, is that my bigger vision? I do it in PowerPoint. I have photos. I add slides out of the new things I'm trying to create. I have decks for about collaborations, who I want to collaborate with, who I want to meet, companies I want to work with. I believe visioning is such an important part of creation exercise. If we don't have a vision, we don't have clarity, and we're a bit aimless. Now, if you're in the middle of a dark night, creating a vision can be quite challenging. That's not the time to quite create your vision. You're still in the healing stage. But the more healing I do, the easier it is to connect with the vision. So you might actually find a very short-term vision is just to heal. It might be just to heal my relationship with my mother, my relationship with my father, to forgive my ex, to learn how to be in healthy relationships. That was a real big part of my visioning for many years. Now I'm a little further on. I don't focus so much on that. My visioning is more about service work. That's the outcome of healing, you'll find, is service work. But if you're just at the beginning of your awakening path, just focus a little bit on, what do I want to look at within myself right now and address, and can that be a part of the vision?
And it's believing that you deserve everything that is to come. Everything that you dream of, you deserve it.
Absolutely. Believing that you deserve it, believing that it's already created, believing that your soul contract was to have the duality, to not have it, to have the struggle and then to have it. I mean, even just understanding that, the polarity. Absolutely. I think self-worth is such a big word. I had debilitating levels of hate towards myself. So I love coaching in this space because I didn't just have a little bit of self-worth issues. I actually had no self-worth. I was in very poor romantic relationships. I let many people walk all over me. I had no worth around money. I couldn't hold on to money. I was just very lonely and confused for a long time. So I have respect for people on a self-worth journey. And it is just that, a journey. And it is increment after increment after increment. And it does mean looking back at our childhood, because our worth is constructed then. So we can look around why we choosing the jobs and the relationships now. But the biggest breakthroughs I had on my self-worth journey was looking back in the childhood and thinking, what did I decide about myself? Why did I decide that I was a failure, or I wasn't good enough, or I needed to be perfect to be loved? So when I went back then, I started to see changes in the decisions I was making as an adult.
And that's why I find journaling has been a big, powerful tool for me through my journey, because if I feel something, I write about it and I'm like, what is it about? Where is it coming from? When was the first time that I felt sad when I was growing up? When was the first time I felt angry? When was the first time I felt disappointed? And by tuning into those things, the stories come and the memories come and the reflections come, and then I can learn from that. And it actually enhances and strengthens my resilience in some of those areas.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the healing journey, I'm just fascinated with the healing journey. I love it. I think my next book is going to be about healing, because inner child work has been powerful. I've done a lot of work around intergenerational trauma, intergenerational patterns, and breaking them. So much of our patterning we don't realize we make is conditioned by grandparents, great-grandparents, through the family line, through our culture line. I love family constellation work. I'm a real advocate for psychedelic therapy, sitting with shamans, doing ayahuasca, in the Amazon. I'm a real fan of all of these different modalities. Have helped me unlock another key in my healing journey. It hasn't been one thing, it's been all of it together, and it's been in the right, I guess, order as well. You start with baby steps, and then as you get a bit of resilience around healing, the next healing door opens, because healing isn't easy. Healing means having an honest look at our life and what has happened, and also taking responsibility that while a bad thing happened in our childhood, that we made a story up about ourselves. So while we can't change the bad thing, we can change the fact that we made the story. And if we made the story, we are responsible for changing that story. So healing is the biggest act of self-responsibility you'll ever take. And then once you take self-responsibility, I found the healing path gains momentum, because we're no longer victim to everyone else around us or our childhood. We're like, I'm now responsible for my future.
Sheila, I know you're very intuitive, and I'm sitting here. Obviously, I've been going through the notes. We've had a great conversation, but I just feel there's something that you want to share with the listeners that may not be on my notes. What calls you right now?
I think I just want to share that whatever dream you have, or whatever the thing is you want to do, can I invite you to think, what kind of brave version of you needs to show up today to take an action to move your life towards that? Can you not have a day that's the same as the day before? And can today be the first day where you do something different? And this isn't about leaving a relationship or writing that resignation letter to your boss. It's more about, what is the little brave act that you're going to take today? Are you going to sign up for that workshop? Are you going to finally find a coach or mentor? Are you going to buy a book about personal development? Are you going to start thinking about what healing could look like? I guess I want to leave your listeners thinking and asking themselves, what can they do that could redirect the course of their life towards feeling like you're living more in alignment with where you want to go?
And I think also as well, we've mentioned shamans, and you and I are both very spiritual, and we're on that path.
Yeah.
Some people listening to this a few times would have gone, oh my God, it's a bit woo-woo. But what I want to say to people is, my path, Sheila's path, our paths are all different. Find something that works for you. Could be breath work, could be meditation, it could be more exercise, it could be anything, right? It's not about listening to this and going, oh, I've got to go to Peru and, sit with a shaman for weeks, or I've got to do certain things. But, be open and curious in regards to what could be something. There might be something that you're sitting there going, oh, I'm not going to do breath work, or I can't meditate. The whole saying is, if you can't meditate for an hour a day, you need to meditate 2 hours, right? Like it's, what is that mooring line, or what is restricting you? Because at the end of the day, if you unlock that, it could be the most powerful thing moving forward.
Absolutely. I tell you what the medicine has been in my life. If I did not do all these spiritual modalities, mindset modalities, emotional healing, my life was getting worse and worse, harder and harder. And that's when we get the dark night. So if we don't actually take life by the reins and sit in the driver's seat and embrace all these new modalities that are emerging now, we will find our life will hit a wall, and it'll be a painful wall. And pain then will be the motivator of change. So we can have pain motivating us to change, or we can just be empowered and do it ourselves now.
Sheila, what's next on your journey? Where is bravery leading you now?
Wow. So I'm leaving in October. I'm going to the US. I'm doing a keynote roadshow in Canada, which I'm so excited about. I'm speaking in Vegas at a conference. I'm doing 2 book signings in the US, and potentially maybe coming back and expanding my family. So there's so much change on the horizon. And yes, that's my next brave move.
Tell me, with these exciting things coming up, this bravery that's kind of led you into speaking globally and this tour, your new book, you're going to write a new book, which is even better. But talk to me about, that's not just plain sailing, right? You still have the inner critic, the, imposter syndrome.
Yep.
Talk to me about that.
So I had a mentor many years ago, and he said, Sheila, when you level up, the devil comes up. And what he meant was, when you level up, your shadow comes up. So every time I move out of my comfort zone, and so we're always expanding our comfort zone. So I went from being someone who was very shy, introverted, and terrified of speaking, to just doing one little panel, to speaking on podcasts, to speaking on a stage in Australia, right? So definitely my comfort zone's expanded. But suddenly every time I expand, there's a new level of critic, which is like, who do you think you are? It's a new audience. You're not as good as them. Is your message strong enough? You know, there's so many versions of the critic that come up that it can be really debilitating, and we can buy into that voice. But I think after we keep an up leveling and expanding, you learn how to manage the voice. You know how to talk to the voice. You know how the voice is trying to protect you. And you say, yes, I know you're trying to protect me, but this is where I want to go. And these are my big and bold dreams. So absolutely, if you peek behind the curtain, I still wake up with anxiety. I still wonder, can I do it? There will be things that happen that I may think, oh gosh, I wish that didn't happen. Yet I will also get on stage and have gratitude for myself and the whole experience. I will high five. I will be proud of myself at the other side of it. And I know I will feel expanded. And that is growth. Growth is uncomfortable. And that's why deep rest is needed. After we put ourselves in a place where we've stretched ourselves, we need to have that holiday. I'm going to go to Sedona for 4 nights and just,
Beautiful.
meditate with my husband and my son, and just do long walks in nature. Because every time there's expansion, we need deep rest because our nervous system is quite rattled. But absolutely, even with the next book, I'm thinking, oh, can I really write a book about healing? I'm not qualified to. So, but my heart and soul is like, yes, but this is what you want to do.
Thanks for sharing that. And I wanted to ask that question because I know there'd be people listening that are like, oh, she's so brave, courageous, but, I want everyone to know that anyone out there that looks like they've got everything going, that they're brave, that they're courageous, everyone goes through. No one is immune to the inner critic, to, imposter syndrome. And at the end of the day, it's just about having those conversations with it and that inner critic, and knowing that, you have the power to write your story and dictate the story, and you can hijack the thoughts that you have.
Yeah. And also recognizing that the inner critic tends to be an authority figure from our childhood. So it's the authority mother or authority father, or someone in our childhood that might have bullied us, or a strict teacher. And it's that voice. So it's not our own voice. It's a voice that we've heard over and over again in our childhood. And then we've internalized it as our own voice. And if we start to just realize that's not my voice. And that voice was trying to protect me for a long time, but no longer needs to do that. And I think that there's so many modalities in the personal development field that can help us dismantle that voice.
I'm so grateful for our paths aligning and for us meeting a while ago, because it's been absolutely fantastic for me to, be empowered by you. But we've had some really great conversations, just like we have in this hour as well. For those that want to continue the journey with you, Sheila, where's the best way for them to find you and connect with you?
Yes, so you can follow me on Instagram at Sheila_V__, or follow me on LinkedIn, or check out my website, sheilav.co.
Well, I'm looking forward to continuing the journey together, Sheila, and watching your tour. I wish you all the best with your tour, the writing of the new book. And I'm just looking forward to, continuing the connection we've got.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sheila.